Hi, I'm Cyber Scott, back again to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity and various best practices from my Amazon best-selling book, The Visible Ops Cybersecurity. In this series, we've talked a lot about different things as it relates to leadership and a security-first mindset. And we also talked a little bit about the right philosophy of leadership and how impactful it is. So today, we're going to talk about the Chapter 3, the efficacy of IT processes, how important that is, right? The failure processes really matter. Let me open with a story. The $450,000 patch delay. Let me give you a real world example. A distribution company, they had a simple system update. Internal conversation sounded familiar. We'll get it done next quarter. It's working just fine right now. Let's not risk breaking anything. That seems like the smart thing to do. That one decision actually created and left open a vulnerabilities, and the attackers found it. They exploited it, and within days, $50,000 was gone. Customer trust was damaged. Key accounts were left very concerned, and leadership was asking, how on earth did this happen? And the answer was already there. It wasn't the technology, it wasn't the cybersecurity, it was simply a lack of IT processes. Transition as basically as we look and we think about that chapter 3, and we kind of look over the overview of what it's going to address in terms of cybersecurity frameworks as it relates to IT processes. There's a direct correlation. It's not bureaucracy just because it's IT processes. Ultimately, the IT processes married to proper cybersecurity are what make organizations basically very secure, and it protects them from being over vulnerable. So we have the illusion that if we have tools, fool with the tools, still a fool, as I talk about. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. Most companies believe that they're secure because they have firewalls, they have antivirus, they may have EDR, endpoint detection, they have monitoring, and certainly all of those tools matter. But here's the problem. Tools don't fail. Processes fail, your IT processes in a lot of cases, because tools only work in a system that has discipline. Without the processes, patches don't get applied, as my story, alerts don't get reviewed, changes don't get controlled, they're not analyzed, risks don't get tracked over time, and slowly your security degrades. This is a foundational principle. So, from my book, I outline things like strong cybersecurity is built on repeatable, well-defined IT processes, not just the technology alone. This actually is the foundation of the original handbook series of Visible Ops, really looking at the IT infrastructure library and some foundational processes, which I go further to in my book. But what frameworks actually do now is when we talk about frameworks like ITIL or Visible Ops or NIST, the National Standards Institute, or zero trust architectures, we're not just talking about theories and fancy things. We're actually talking about structure, frameworks that answer critical questions like, how are changes made? Do we classify changes? Do we approve them? How are our risks evaluated? What are we actually monitoring? What happens if something goes wrong? Do we have rollback? Do we truly have immutable backups? Without these answers, you really don't have security. You really just have guesswork. I think about the hero IT guy scenario, right? This is another story. A company, they had a really brilliant IT engineer. He was the smart guy everybody looked to, and he fixed everything. Nothing he couldn't really get his head around. And systems are running, and leadership just loved him. Everybody's very comfortable. But there was a problem. Everything lived in his head. We all probably kind of know that guy. No documentation, really, no formal process, no change tracking. And then one day he left. And within 60 days, because the systems were all in his head, things were unstable, patches were missed, configurations drifted, vulnerabilities went through the roof, and eventually the company was breached. Not because they lacked talent. Certainly they had smart people. He was a really smart guy. But they lacked IT process discipline. That's why it really matters. So if your cybersecurity depends on a person, he gets sick, takes vacation, quits, it's fragile. It really depends on good IT processes. That's what's scalable. So the 3 core processes that I get into in my book, really that are the foundational pieces of Visible Ops, is really around the methodology of configuration management, change management, and release management. These 3 work together as kind of a closed loop process. The idea that if you don't know that it's configured and in a secure working state, you're actually may have a snowflake, something that's not secure. But once you know it's stable and secure in the configuration, you can then apply change management and not make any changes unless you have a full plan to keep it from one secure state to the next secure state. As we think about change management, obvious questions like, are we classifying change? Are we thinking about the impact of the change, right? So the powerful truth is that every breach basically starts with a change. A system changed, a credential got changed, a configuration changed, or behavior changed, as my book highlights, right? 70% of outages and failures are caused by unauthorized, untested, unmanaged change. That's not a hacking problem, that's an IT process problem. So it's really important. And then lastly, besides configuration and really good change management, we have to think about release management, right? Are we testing the updates that we're releasing into the environment? Are the releases controlled, right? Do we have a test pilot set? Do we have rollback in place? Because rushing changes is that's one of the biggest issues. The big CrowdStrike issue, for example, was due to a failed change, a release that shouldn't have been released, it was automated. So you can't avoid the IT processes. It's the honest truth about what keeps you secure, the ultimate backstop. Most organizations just don't think about that. They're ignoring it because it feels slow or it feels bureaucratic or unnecessary until something breaks, until something gets breached, and until something costs money. Then the business seems to care. I'm thinking about the startup that scaled up too fast, right? A small SaaS company scaled from 10 to 150 employees in under a year. They prioritize speed, innovation, growth, right? All the things that the business applauds because they believe it's driving revenue quickly. But they skipped documenting things, having change control processes, not really having any formal security. They pushed untested things out. They exposed an API, an application interface endpoint. Attackers found it right away. The customer's data got exposed. The company didn't actually just face a technical recovery. They faced legal exposure because clients' data got stolen. They had customer loss. Investors got upset. They had pressure, didn't feel like they were keeping the business safe and costing them money. They didn't keep the processes scaling with their growth. So, process creates speed, not slowness. This is where many leaders kind of get it wrong. They think that process slows them down, but in reality, good process actually speeds everything up because it eliminates confusion, rework, firefighting, emergency fixes, and all-night things trying to repair some patch that went out. It turns chaos into clarity and clarity into speed. So, what is the executive insight here, right? As I talk about my executive edition, in that guide, it reinforces this idea that cybersecurity is not just technical complexity, it's actually about operational discipline and business alignment. That's super important. You've got to align your technology with the business. They work hand in hand and they work together. So, the cost of no processes, let's make it real. Without these, organizations face missed patches, inconsistent configurations, untracked changes, delayed incident response, compliance failures. If you've got any compliance, super important, fines, audits, get denied insurance claims if you did have a breach, and ultimately your breach probability goes through the roof. And that costs money. And actually, 40% of businesses that suffer a major breach will close within 1 year. Crazy statistic. Anyway, maturity is not defined by how many tools you have. It's defined by how consistently you operate your IT processes. Really important. And so, what's great about organizations that they should do different? Most resilient organizations, they do a few key things. They standardize their configurations. They care a lot about documenting things. They require approvals and processes to test things and make sure they have peer review. And they classify their releases and changes. They monitor things continuously. They review and improve constantly. And they treat cybersecurity as a system, not just a project or a one-time thing. The quietly secure company, also a story I'll tell you about, they're the one that you don't really hear about in the news because nothing really ever happens to them, right? They run weekly change reviews, they maintain configuration baselines, they test backups regularly, they're immutable, they enforce strict access controls, and still they get attacked every day, but nothing significant happens because their processes catch the problems early and they basically eradicate them, block them, and keep the business safe. That's where the processes kick in. That's why they matter. The goal of cybersecurity is not really to avoid attacks. It's to make attacks irrelevant. They're still going to happen, right? That's part of the zero trust principle. We assume breach. So we have good rollback. We have backups. We can restore. We know what our plan is. That way, if the bad day ever comes when you're breached, you don't have to worry about paying the hackers. You just know that within 4 hours, 8 hours, 2 days, you're going to be all back up and running. Cybersecurity frameworks and processes are not optional. They're actually the operating system of a secure organization. In IP services, we talk about ZTOS. Yep, that's a zero trust operating system. That's how you keep an organization secure. Tools will fail, people will fail, systems will drift, everything can become predictable, everything becomes manageable, and everything can become resilient with the right thinking, the right IT processes, and caring about that. So if you want better cybersecurity, don't start with another tool. As I said, a fool with a tool is still a fool. Start with better IT processes, because in the end, security isn't what you install, it's what you consistently do. Thank you, and I look forward to sharing with you next time. You can learn more and get more resources at our website at www.ipservices.com or www.scottalldridge.com. You can get my books, you can get resources and learn more. We'll be talking soon again. Thank you.